June 19, 1944, 08:47 hours, 200 miles west of Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Nakamura, one of Japan's most decorated carrier pilots with 17 confirmed kills, sat in the cockpit of his Mitsubishi A6M0 preparing for launch. He had survived Midway, fought over Rabaul, and trained the next generation of naval aviators. But on this morning, as intelligence officers briefed the strike force on their targets, one phrase made his hands grip the control stick until his knuckles turned white. American Hellcats confirmed in the area. What happened in the skies that day would become known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By sunset, over 600 Japanese aircraft would be destroyed. But the numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is about how a single American fighter, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, didn't just defeat Japanese aviation, it psychologically annihilated it. By late 1944, experienced Japanese pilots were requesting ground assignments rather than face Hellcats in combat. Some simply refused to fly. This is the story of the fighter that broke the spirit of Japan's elite aviators. The weapon that would terrorize Japanese pilots was born from American desperation and humiliation. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The shock of the Japanese surprise attack was compounded by a devastating tactical reality. American carrier fighters were catastrophically outmatched. The Grumman F4F Wildcat, America's primary carrier fighter, faced the Mitsubishi A6M0 in combat for the first time over Wake Island on December 11, 1941. The results were devastating. According to Navy combat reports, Zeros could outturn, outclimb, and outrange the Wildcat in nearly every performance category. The Zero could climb to 20,000 feet in 7 minutes and 20 seconds. The Wildcat required nearly 11 minutes. Maximum speed differential favored the Zero by approximately 30 miles per hour at optimal altitude. Japanese pilot training in 1941 represented the culmination of years of combat experience over China. The average Japanese carrier pilot entering Pearl Harbor operations had logged between 500 and 800 flight hours, with many veterans possessing over 2,000 hours and actual combat experience. They flew in aircraft specifically designed for carrier operations and aerial supremacy, lightweight construction, exceptional maneuverability, extended range exceeding 1,600 miles with external tanks. Lieutenant Roy Grumman received urgent communication from the Bureau of Aeronautics on December 15, 1941. The message was direct. Current fighter inadequate against Japanese Zero. Require immediate development of superior replacement. Maximum priority authorized. The challenge seemed impossible. American doctrine had emphasized different priorities than Japanese design philosophy. The Zero achieved its performance through radical weight reduction, no armor plating protecting the pilot, no self-sealing fuel tanks, minimal armament consisting of 2 7.7mm machine guns and 2 20mm cannons. The aircraft was in essence a flying fuel tank with guns, lethal in a dogfight, but desperately vulnerable to counterfire. American pilots had already discovered this vulnerability. At the Battle of Coral Sea in May 1942, Wildcat pilots learned that while they couldn't outmaneuver Zeros, concentrated firepower could destroy them with shocking efficiency. Lieutenant Edward O'Hare had demonstrated this on February 20, 1942, shooting down 5 Japanese bombers in a single engagement by exploiting their lack of protection. The Grumman engineering team, working from their facility in Bethpage, New York, faced a design paradox. They needed to create a fighter that could match or exceed Zero performance while incorporating the protection and firepower that American doctrine demanded. The specifications seemed contradictory. Heavy armor and more guns meant more weight, which meant reduced maneuverability and climb rate. Chief Engineer William Schwendler's team began with brutal analysis of combat reports from Coral Sea and Midway. They studied gun camera footage, interviewed surviving pilots, and examined recovered Zero wreckage. One pattern emerged clearly. The Zero dominated in turning engagements below 15,000 feet, but American fighters with superior diving speed could dictate engagement terms. The solution would require revolutionary engineering, a fighter heavy enough to absorb punishment and deliver devastating firepower, yet powerful enough to compete with the Zero's performance envelope. On June 26, 1942, exactly 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the prototype F6F lifted off from Grumman's test facility for its first flight. What emerged from Grumman's design process was not just an improved fighter, it was a purpose-built Zero killer. The F6F Hellcat incorporated every lesson American pilots had learned through blood over the Pacific. But more importantly, it was designed to exploit every weakness in Japanese aircraft and tactical doctrine. The heart of the Hellcat was the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, a massive 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower. This engine, the most powerful operational fighter engine in the world at that time, gave the Hellcat capabilities that would prove psychologically devastating to Japanese pilots. Maximum speed reached 380 miles per hour at 23,400 feet, rate of climb 3,500 feet per minute, allowing the Hellcat to reach 20,000 feet in less than 7 minutes, nearly matching the Zero's climb performance despite weighing almost 3,000 pounds more. But the Hellcat's true revolution lay in what that extra weight provided. Chief Engineer Schwendler's team had armored the aircraft like a flying battleship compared to the Zero. Behind the pilot sat a thick steel plate capable of stopping 20mm cannon rounds. The fuel tanks were self-sealing, utilizing multiple layers of rubber that would automatically seal bullet holes. Cockpit glass was bullet-resistant. The entire aircraft was designed on a principle Japanese engineers had rejected: survive the hit, then strike back. Armament specifications told the story of American design philosophy. 6 Browning M2 .50 caliber machine guns mounted in 3 in each wing with 400 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total. The M2 Browning, firing 750 to 850 rounds per minute, could deliver approximately 140 rounds per second across all 6 guns. Each .50 caliber round weighed 1.7 ounces and traveled at 2,900 feet per second, sufficient to penetrate aircraft aluminum at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. Navy gunnery tests conducted at Naval Air Station Patuxent River in October 1942 demonstrated the Hellcat's firepower advantage. A single 2-second burst from all 6 guns delivered approximately 280 rounds, over 4 pounds of lead and steel screaming downrange. Test targets, including captured Zero airframes, were literally disintegrated. The Zero's lightweight construction, which provided its legendary maneuverability, made it catastrophically vulnerable to this concentration of firepower. Flight testing revealed another critical advantage. The Hellcat could dive at speeds exceeding 450 miles per hour without structural failure. The Zero's maximum dive speed was approximately 370 miles per hour before structural damage occurred. This differential gave Hellcat pilots an escape route that Japanese pilots simply couldn't follow. American tactical doctrine evolved around this capability: engage from altitude, make a single high-speed pass, and dive away before Zeros could bring their turning advantage into play. Grumman test pilot Robert Hall documented the aircraft's characteristics in official reports dated November 1942. The F6F combines adequate maneuverability with superior speed, exceptional diving characteristics, and phenomenal durability. The aircraft can absorb battle damage that would destroy any Japanese fighter and return safely to the carrier. Properly employed, this aircraft should achieve overwhelming superiority against current Japanese types. The first production F6F-3 rolled off Grumman's assembly line on October 3, 1942. By January 1943, VF-9 Squadron aboard USS Essex began receiving the first operational Hellcats. The weapon that would shatter Japanese air power was ready for combat. August 31, 1943, 0623 hours. Marcus Island, 1,150 miles southeast of Tokyo. Lieutenant Commander James Flatley, led VF-5 Squadron in the Hellcat's first major combat engagement. What followed would establish a pattern that would repeat across the Pacific for the next 2 years. Japanese interceptors, consisting of 18 A6M-0s from the 252nd Air Group, rose to meet the American strike force. The Zero pilots, veterans with an average of 14 months combat experience, employed their standard tactics, type-turning engagements designed to exploit their maneuverability advantage. But the American pilots had been extensively trained in new doctrine specifically designed for the Hellcat. Combat reports filed by VF-5 Squadron detailed the engagement with clinical precision. American fighters maintained altitude advantage, typically 5,000 to 8,000 feet above the Japanese formation. When Zeros climbed to engage, Hellcat pilots executed high-speed diving passes, firing concentrated bursts before using superior diving speed to disengage. The Zeros could not follow without risking structural failure. The results were documented in gun camera footage and post-mission debriefings. 11 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 3 probables. 0 American losses. The kill ratio was 11-0. But more significant than the numbers was the tactical revelation. Properly flown Hellcats were essentially invulnerable to Zero attacks when pilots maintained energy advantage and refused turning engagements. Lieutenant Theodore Winters, flying Hellcat number 23, provided detailed testimony. I made 3 separate diving attacks. Each time the Zero attempted to turn into my attack. Each time I fired a 2-second burst and dove away at full throttle. On my 3rd pass, I observed my target literally disintegrate. The entire tail section separated from the fuselage. The Zero pilot never had an opportunity to employ his maneuverability advantage because I never gave him a turning engagement. Japanese after-action reports, captured after the war, revealed the psychological impact of this first major engagement. Commander Saburo Yoshida, leading the 252nd Air Group, filed a disturbing assessment to Combined Fleet Headquarters. American carrier fighters demonstrate performance previously thought impossible for aircraft of their weight class. Our pilots report inability to escape when diving attack is initiated. Maneuverability advantage proves useless when enemy refuses close combat. Request immediate tactical evaluation of enemy capabilities. The Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 provided the next major test. Japanese naval aviation committed approximately 150 aircraft to counter the American invasion. VF-1, VF-2, and VF-6 squadrons, all equipped with Hellcats, were tasked with establishing air superiority. The engagement lasted 3 days. Navy records documented the outcome with stark clarity. 127 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. American losses, 8 Hellcats with 5 pilots recovered. The kill ratio had reached nearly 16-1. But the truly devastating statistic appeared in Japanese communications intercepted by Pacific Fleet radio intelligence. On November 23, 1943, at 18:45 hours, a transmission from Vice Admiral Kakuji Kakuda to Combined Fleet Operations stated air groups reduced to 40% effective strength. Pilot morale severely affected. Multiple aviators report American fighters possess overwhelming performance advantage. Request immediate reinforcement and tactical assessment of enemy capabilities. The Hellcat hadn't just won air superiority, it had begun to break Japanese aviation psychologically. American intelligence analysts noted a critical pattern emerging. Japanese pilots were becoming reluctant to engage when Hellcats were present.
June 19, 1944. The Philippine Sea. What American pilots would later call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot represented the complete validation of Hellcat supremacy and the psychological destruction of Japanese carrier aviation. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet launched 4 massive strikes against Task Force 58, committing virtually every operational carrier aircraft in the Japanese Navy, approximately 373 aircraft in the initial waves. Ozawa believed his aircraft's superior range would allow him to strike American carriers while remaining beyond American attack radius. He was counting on the same tactical advantages that had worked at Coral Sea and Midway 2 years earlier, but those advantages had evaporated. The Hellcat had changed everything. American radar detected the first Japanese strike at 1,000 hours, range 150 miles. Admiral Mark Mitcher ordered all available fighters airborne. 15 Hellcat squadrons, totaling 220 aircraft, climbed to intercept altitude. The fighter director officers vectored Hellcats to optimal intercept positions using radar guidance. Another technological advantage Japanese forces lacked. The first contact occurred at 1,036 hours, approximately 60 miles west of the task force. VF-15 Squadron Commander David Campbell reported the initial engagement. We hit them at 20,000 feet with altitude and speed advantage. It wasn't a fight. It was execution. They flew straight formations like it was 1942. We dove through them repeatedly. I personally observed 6 aircraft destroyed in the first 3 minutes. The slaughter continued for 8 hours across 4 separate Japanese strike waves. Navy fighter direction officers maintained constant radar tracking, vectoring fresh Hellcat squadrons to intercept each new Japanese formation before they could reach the American carriers. Japanese pilots, many with only 100 hours total flight time due to training program collapse, faced American aviators flying superior aircraft with tactical radar guidance. The statistics from that single day destroyed Japanese naval aviation as an effective fighting force. Official U.S. Navy records documented 380 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 243 in aerial combat, 137 by anti-aircraft fire. American losses: 23 aircraft with 16 pilots recovered. In aerial combat specifically, the kill ratio reached 10.5 to 1. But the numbers concealed an even more devastating reality documented in Japanese communications intelligence. Radio intercepts translated by Fleet Radio Unit Pacific revealed the psychological collapse in real time. June 19, 1,323 hours. Request immediate fighter support. Cannot penetrate American fighter screen. June 19, 1456 hours. All strike aircraft destroyed before reaching target. No survivors observed. June 19, 1647 hours. 4th strike decimated. American fighters possess overwhelming advantage. Mission impossible to complete. Lieutenant Zenji Abe, one of the few Japanese survivors, provided testimony during post-war interrogations. We were told we would face the same American fighters from 1942. Instead, we encountered aircraft that were faster, could outdive us, had superior altitude performance, and possessed firepower that destroyed our aircraft with single bursts. Our instructors had not prepared us for this. Many pilots simply froze when they saw the Hellcats coming. The battle didn't just destroy Japanese aircraft. It destroyed the mythology that had sustained Japanese aviation since Pearl Harbor. The belief that superior pilot spirit and maneuverability could overcome material disadvantages. The Hellcat had proved that mythology false with mathematical brutality.
By late 1944, American intelligence officers documented a phenomenon unprecedented in the Pacific War aviation. Experienced Japanese pilots were actively avoiding combat assignments against Hellcat-equipped American forces. Lieutenant Commander Yoshiro Hashiguchi, a Japanese Navy ace with 22 confirmed victories before June 1944, provides the most documented case. Captured documents and post-war testimony revealed that Hashiguchi requested transfer to training duties in September 1944, citing health considerations. Medical examination found him physically fit for combat. Further investigation revealed the real reason. Hashiguchi had witnessed the turkey shoot and refused to face Hellcats again. His testimony to American interrogators in 1946 was brutally honest. "I had fought against wildcats successfully. I understood their limitations and could exploit them. But the Hellcat was completely different. It had no exploitable weakness when properly flown. The American pilots had been trained to never give us the turning fight where we held advantage. They stayed high, dove fast, struck hard, and escaped before we could respond. Fighting Hellcats wasn't combat, it was suicide." Japanese combined fleet records, captured intact at the end of the war, documented this psychological collapse systematically. Monthly pilot reports from October 1944 through March 1945 showed increasing references to what pilots termed Hellcat sickness, a condition where experienced aviators developed physical symptoms when assigned missions against American carrier forces. The 343rd Naval Air Group reformed in December 1944 under Captain Minoru Genda, with Japan's remaining elite pilots, included several aviators who had scored over 10 victories earlier in the war. Their operational records tell a disturbing story. Mission decline rates increased from 3% in December 1944 to 17% by February 1945. Pilots were claiming mechanical problems, illness, or simply refusing orders. One captured report from Commander Takeo Tanemizu, dated February 1945, stated explicitly, "Pilot morale has collapsed against American carrier forces. Even experienced aviators express reluctance to engage when Hellcats are present. This represents fundamental psychological defeat that technical improvements cannot address." The Battle of Iwo Jima in February 1945 demonstrated this collapse conclusively. Japanese naval aviation committed approximately 200 aircraft to oppose American landings. American Hellcat squadrons from Task Force 58 flew continuous combat air patrols. The result was predictable. 165 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 12 American fighters lost. But the more significant detail appeared in radio intercepts. Japanese pilots were deliberately jettisoning bombs and fuel tanks before engaging, trying to improve maneuverability, then immediately disengaging when Hellcats appeared. Former Lieutenant Naoshi Kano, interviewed by Strategic Bombing Survey investigators, provided the most damning testimony. By early 1945, the order to attack American carriers meant death. We all knew it. The Hellcat pilots had been fighting for 2 years and possessed enormous experience. Their aircraft was superior in every practical aspect. Our training program had collapsed. New pilots had perhaps 100 hours total flight time. We were sending children to fight experts in superior machines. Some pilots who survived their first encounter with Hellcats simply refused to fly again. Command considered them cowards, but I understood. They had seen the future, and it was death. The Hellcat had achieved what no weapon in military history had accomplished. It had broken the fighting spirit of an enemy aviation force before destroying it physically. The Hellcat's dominance wasn't merely about aircraft performance. It represented American industrial capacity, operating at a scale Japanese planners had considered impossible. The production numbers tell a story of overwhelming material superiority that crushed Japanese hopes of achieving any form of aerial parity. Grumman's Bethpage facility, expanded dramatically in 1943, achieved production rates that exceeded Japan's entire fighter output. In 1943, Grumman produced 2,545 Hellcats. In 1944, production reached 6,139 aircraft. By war's end in August 1945, total Hellcat production exceeded 12,275 aircraft. To understand the psychological impact on Japanese military planners, consider the comparison. Japan's total production of all fighter types in 1944 was approximately 13,000 aircraft. The United States produced more Hellcats alone than Japan produced total fighters, and the Hellcat represented only one of multiple American fighter types in mass production. But quantity alone doesn't explain the Hellcat's dominance. American logistics transformed numerical advantage into overwhelming battlefield superiority. Each carrier task group required approximately 70 to 90 fighters for 3 to 4 squadrons. When aircraft were lost or damaged, replacements arrived within days from forward logistics bases established across the Pacific. Vice Admiral Richmond Turner's war diary documented this logistics miracle in March 1945. Replacement aircraft arrive faster than squadrons can absorb them. We are conducting combat operations with fighter strength consistently above authorized levels because new Hellcats arrive before damaged aircraft are fully written off. Japanese forces have no equivalent support system. The maintenance differential was equally devastating. Hellcats were designed for carrier operations with rapid turnaround maintenance. Official Navy maintenance records show average repair time for battle damage. Minor damage, under 5% structural, 8 to 12 hours. Moderate damage, 5 to 15% structural, 2 to 3 days. Severe damage, 15 to 30% structural, 5 to 7 days. Aircraft with over 30% damage were typically salvaged for parts rather than repaired. Japanese maintenance capabilities had collapsed by 1944. Spare parts were unavailable, experienced mechanics were scarce, and damaged aircraft often remained non-operational for weeks. Captured Japanese maintenance logs from Truk Atoll showed aircraft awaiting parts for critical systems, some grounded for over 3 months. The training pipeline amplified American advantages further. By 1944, American carrier pilots received 300 to 600 flight hours before combat deployment, including 40 to 80 hours specifically in the Hellcat. Training emphasized the tactics that exploited Hellcat advantages: altitude maintenance, high-speed diving attacks, coordinated team maneuvers using radio communication. Japanese training had collapsed entirely by late 1944. New pilots received 100 to 150 hours total flight time, with minimal operational training in frontline aircraft. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, former leader of the Pearl Harbor attack, testified post-war. By 1945, we were sending pilots into combat who had never practiced carrier landings, never fired guns at realistic targets, never flown formation in their operational aircraft. They faced American pilots with hundreds of hours in Hellcats, extensive combat experience, and superior aircraft. It was murder. The Hellcat represented more than technological superiority. It demonstrated that modern industrial warfare requires overwhelming production capacity, sophisticated logistics, and comprehensive training systems. Japan possessed none of these advantages by 1944. And no amount of warrior spirit could compensate for such fundamental material inferiority.
August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast ended the Pacific War. By that date, the F6F Hellcat had compiled combat statistics unprecedented in aviation history. 5,223 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 75% of all U.S. Navy air-to-air victories during the war, 19-to-1 overall kill ratio, 305 Hellcat pilots achieving ace status, 5 or more kills. But the numbers don't capture the Hellcat's true impact. This aircraft didn't just win air superiority, it psychologically destroyed Japanese aviation as a fighting force and demonstrated the decisive nature of industrial supremacy in modern warfare. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, post-war, provided perhaps the most honest Japanese assessment. The Hellcat represented everything we could not match: superior technology, unlimited production, comprehensive logistics, and systematic training. When we sent our pilots against Hellcats, we were sending them to die. They knew it, we knew it, but there was no alternative because American industry could produce Hellcats faster than we could train pilots to face them. The Strategic Bombing Survey's interrogation of senior Japanese officers revealed that by mid-1944, Japanese naval aviation had effectively written off the possibility of achieving air superiority against American carrier forces. The Hellcat had become synonymous with American technological dominance, a symbol that Japanese forces could not overcome through courage or tactical innovation. The aircraft's influence extended beyond immediate combat effectiveness. American tactical doctrine developed around the Hellcat. Altitude advantage, high-speed engagement, team coordination, radar direction became standard fighter tactics for the jet age. The fundamental principles of exploiting energy advantage and avoiding opponents' strengths influenced air combat doctrine for decades. For Japanese aviation, the Hellcat represented the moment when warrior spirit and tactical skill became insufficient against material superiority. Lieutenant General Torashiro Kawebe testified to interrogators. "We believed superior fighting spirit could overcome material disadvantage. The Hellcat proved we were wrong. Your pilots were well-trained, your aircraft was superior, and you could replace losses faster than we could inflict them. This combination was unbeatable." The last recorded Hellcat aerial victory occurred on August 13, 1945, just 2 days before surrender. Lieutenant Clarence Moore of VF-88 Squadron shot down a Japanese reconnaissance aircraft near Tokyo Bay. The Hellcat's war ended as it had been fought, with complete dominance. Today, surviving Hellcats are displayed in museums as monuments to American industrial power and technological innovation during World War II. But perhaps the aircraft's most significant legacy is documented in those Japanese pilot testimonies, accounts of experienced aviators who saw the Hellcat and understood that courage alone could not overcome such complete material superiority. The F6F Hellcat didn't just defeat Japanese aviation, it demonstrated a fundamental truth of modern warfare. In industrial-age combat, victory belongs to the nation that can combine superior technology with overwhelming production capacity and comprehensive training systems. Japan possessed brave pilots and effective tactics, but faced an opponent who could field thousands of superior aircraft flown by well-trained pilots supported by limitless logistics. The Hellcat proved that in modern war, industrial supremacy is as decisive as courage and far more difficult to overcome.